So this story didn't really happen in Rockford, though the end happened in Rockford. In the beginning, I was in Danville, Illinois. There's a lot of reasons that you marry someone. And one of the reasons I wanted to marry my husband was he was a baby whisperer. Our friends that had colicky babies would hand them to him, and he would sing and soothe them to sleep. And so I knew this was a man that needed to be a father. Our first baby, I knew was a girl, and we were going to name her Elizabeth Janice after our mothers. And when she was born, she was perfect. All the 10 fingers and toes and a perfect face. But she was too soon. They could not save babies that were less than a pound then. And when soon after her brother came, we named him Jeremy. Now, the doctor said it was too soon for him to tell if it was a boy or a girl, but I knew. And that same doctor was the one that told me that my uterus was misshapen. It was in 2 sections, something that is called bicornuate, and it meant that neither section was large enough to have a child full term. And when he told me this, I couldn't even think to ask questions. And I went home and I thought and I tried to figure, what are we, we are supposed to have children. And we had friends that had adopted children that were mixed race children. And this was a white couple, and I thought, well, we would be perfect. I mean, more than perfect, because I'm white and my husband is black, and we would be the perfect parents for these children that were supposed to be hard to place. And the adoption agency agreed that, yes, we would be a great couple, but they have requirements, because when you have to actually apply for adoption, there's requirements. And we hadn't been married long enough. They wouldn't count the 5 years that it took us to get married, because we are members of the Baha'i faith, which is all about unity. And it's a beautiful faith. And one of the things that was probably the hardest thing for me was, when I considered becoming a Baha'i, was that you have to get your parents' consent to marry, because unity begins with family. And it took 5 years for us to get that consent. But once we got it, it was love and support, and we had that. But they didn't count those years. And then we didn't really make a lot of money. I was a mime artist. He was, yeah. George was an actor, and to make money was a social worker, caseworker, lower level. We never expected to make a lot of money. So I went back to the doctor and asked if there was anything that he could do so that I could have a child. And he said, no, there's nothing I can do for you. But he pointed out that obviously I could get pregnant. And he said that in some cases, that with subsequent pregnancies, the uterus can expand. And so perhaps eventually could be large enough to be able to have a child that would survive. He couldn't tell me if this would happen in 1 or 2 or a dozen, or maybe never. When Elizabeth died, I wanted to go with her. And that night, I would wake up and first feel if she was still here, that it had just been a nightmare. And when it wasn't, I asked the universe to let me go. And I heard singing. And I knew it was the ancestors letting me know that she was with them. And it wasn't my time. But what he told me reminded me of the dream that I had been having, in which I'm walking through a graveyard, seeing tiny tombstones and knowing every one of them was my baby. And all of this I knew was in my face, because I cannot hide my feelings. And I looked at him, and he looked at me with a hard, cold look. And I knew that he did not care. And he turned around and walked out of the room. And then I heard the voice in my head, and I do hear a voice, and it screamed at me, "Look at your chart." And I got down off of the table, and I picked up the chart that I knew, because I had had training as a nurse's aide. I know that you're not supposed to let the patient see their chart, because sometimes you write little things in that chart that you don't want them to see. And that chart, inside, I saw written in faded black marker, "White woman with black man." I went to my friend who had recommended him, who herself had a mixed-race child, not good circumstances. Her husband had had a vasectomy. Her lover was a black man. She had a baby. She said, "Well, yes, he's very racist. He wanted me to have an abortion, not because of the affair, but because he did not want to bring mongrels into this world." And I said, "Why did you recommend him?" And she said, "Well, because he's a doctor. He's got to do what he's supposed to do, and he's the best in town." So I made an appointment with a doctor at the University of Illinois in Champaign that was 45 minutes away. And this doctor, when he looked at the chart that no longer had that piece of paper in it, he said, where's the x-ray? And I said, "We didn't do any x-rays." And he said, "Well, I can tell you that I have helped women like you. We've reconstructed their uterus and they've had children, but until I see an x-ray, I won't know if you have enough material to work with." So we had the x-ray. And that was in the morning. The consultation with him would be in the afternoon. My husband had to work. He said, "I'll be there if I can." And I said, "No, it's okay." And I watched the x-ray, and the technician pointed out the uterus that was heart-shaped, which is cute. Yeah. And it was so small. And I knew this was not going to work. And I called George and I told him, I said, "I saw it. It's so small, it's not going to work." And I don't think I told him this, but I know that I was trying to figure out who else he should marry. That either the universe was going to answer my prayer and let me be with my children, or I was going to divorce him so he could find someone, because he was supposed to be a father. But George said, "You don't have a doctor's degree that I know of, so maybe you should wait to hear what the doctor says." And so I steeled myself, because I was sure I knew what he was going to say. And I walked in and I started talking to him and saying, "I know it's too small." And then he said, "No, it's not. There is plenty of material. I can reconstruct your uterus and you can have your baby." A year and a half later, we had Nathan Allen Davis. 2 years later, we had Bahia, his sister. They are both now writers, artists. It's not just me who thinks that they are wonderful. They have had literary awards. My daughter has an agent searching for a publisher. My son won as a playwright Lorraine Hansberry Award. He was a fellow at Juilliard. He's had plays produced. He is now working on a play that is going to speak about Black Wall Street. He wrote a play about Nat Turner. They are putting out words and thoughts and understanding in this world that is going to change the way the world understands itself. I understand that when we die and go to the next world, people who have had that experience and come back have talked about that you have a life review. And one woman described it as, it's like the pebble in the water and you see the ripples. So you know the actions and the things that you did that were good and how that had its effect, and what was bad and how that had its effect, and you feel it. I don't know if the doctor is still alive, but someday, even if he's alive, he will someday go there. And when that happens, I know that he's going to see that moment in time, that one time that he left that chart in the room. And he is going to know that that is one of the most wonderful things he ever did.